The most notorious murderer to walk the streets of D.C. was sent to prison today. Sean Branch was sentenced for first-degree murder and related gun charges. As Joe Krebs reports, getting this far in the Branch case has proved to be a challenging task.
Police and prosecutors say Sean Branch is a violent man. A killer, in fact, a Teflon murderer to whom, up until now, no charges.
Hey, what's up? What it do? It's Uptown Eon, man. I've been getting a lot of requests to do a story on Sean Branch, Teflon Sean from Washington, D.C. And a lot of times I've been kind of like sidestepping the SB story because his story has been told, certain ways on other media platforms. And he got some other big things in the making about the story, so I kind of avoided it. But since I've been getting a lot of requests about Sean Branch and his story, I found an angle that not many people know about. One angle is how the U.S. Attorney's Office in Washington, D.C. used the media to help convict Sean Branch. Now, a lot of people might not know his story. He had been tried or accused and charged in about 10 different crimes between 1988 and like 1993. Out of all the 10 cases, from murder cases to assault with intent to kill. Or for those who don't know who Sean Branch is, Sean Branch grew up in a 2000 block of Douglas Street, Northeast Washington, D.C. It's just a short walk away from Montana Terrace. He allegedly graduated to the streets and gravitated towards, moving fast, let's say, as a kid, and began hanging in Montana Terrace. But the Washington Post gave him the name Teflon Sean. And I believe they did that in an attempt to convince D.C. residents and potential jurors that, this man was above the law, or at least thought he was above the law. It was the end of a 6-year streak of cases beat by Sean Branch. For years, he was accused of being a so-called drug gang enforcer. Most notably, Sean Branch was known to avoid guilty verdicts in Washington, D.C. courtrooms in the late 80s and early 90s, when D.C. was known as the murder capital of the United States. Sean Branch was charged with 4 homicides and 6 other criminal cases in D.C. alone since 1988. But he was found guilty for the first time in a D.C. Superior Court in March of 1994. It was the end of a string of cases where Sean Branch came out on top. As the government would put it, often after government witnesses turned up dead or refused to testify against him in court.
But tonight, Sean Branch is headed to prison. Jen Fox has more on the 3-year-old charges that finally stuck to a man dubbed the Teflon Killer. Teflon Sean, they nicknamed the diminutive Sean Branch, until the day the 22-year-old Northeast man beat 8 out of 10 charges against him. Today, he got 26 years. Prosecutor Karen Rue called Branch a killer who belongs with other killers, not on the streets to kill again. She asked for the maximum.
Prosecutors from the United States Attorney's Office in Washington, D.C. have described Branch as a contract killer. They admit that Branch has never been convicted of witness intimidation, but they stated in open court that witnesses fear his reputation for dangerousness. In a 5-day trial, Sean Branch was convicted, while his co-defendant was acquitted of the murder and all other charges. Going back to 1988, a murder charge for a stabbing death was dismissed after several witnesses failed to show up in open court, according to United States Attorney's prosecutors. In another murder case, according to federal prosecutors, they had to drop a case the year before because a witness was slain and another witness refused to testify against Sean Branch. In another shooting case, a victim told police that he feared being hit if he testified. And all these allegations come from court cases and prosecutor statements in the Washington Post. Now, let's address the Washington Post, the issue that I had with the Washington Post. Now, a jury is supposed to be impartial, but the Washington Post is the biggest publication from here to Baltimore in regards to what goes on in the D.C. area. While Sean Branch was on trial for murder, they ran a story about him and his criminal past. I believe that, this story was planned by prosecutors, but check out how they did it. When they ran a story about his criminal past, it was on the Sunday edition on the front page. That is the biggest paper and the biggest edition of the Washington Post for the week, the Sunday paper. And he was on the front page of the Sunday paper. As a defense attorney, Bernard Grimm, which was his defense attorney, put it this way: the government's case against Sean Branch is weak at the most. That was until the media got involved. The news networks ran stories depicting Sean Branch as a vicious contract killer. But the kicker was the front page coverage the Washington Post did about Sean Branch in the Sunday edition of the biggest newspaper in the area, Grimm said. And others strongly believed the newspaper coverage led to the guilty verdict. In a small city like Washington, D.C., how could a front page article about a defendant not influence a jury? The article outlined Sean Branch's previous cases in D.C. with maps and pictures, dates and times, and most importantly, evidence and situations of witness intimidation. So they wanted the jury to believe that no matter what the defense put up about evidence being missing, evidence not being strong, evidence not being corroborated, they put in the jury's head that this person intimidated witnesses or made witnesses disappear. And that's the kicker. Oh, before we move on, let's not forget that the Washington Post, the good old Washington Post, is the very entity that created the title of Teflon Suspect and the title of Teflon Sean, with stories they ran while he was on trial for all these different crimes that they alleged that he committed. The judge in the case, which was John Suter was my judge at the time. Me and Sean Branch was over DC jail together in the early 90s. I had this exact same judge, John H. Suter. He actually, I don't want to say was disbarred, but left the bench for having some type of mental issues. John Suter questioned the jury and asked them, brought the jury into the chambers and questioned them about this front page article in the Washington Post, which no one in their right mind, telling the truth, could say that they didn't see, right? Several of the jurors admitted that they had read the article, read the headlines of the article, or read parts of the article. All that means that the jury was contaminated, and that means that they admitted to being contaminated if they read these articles about all these different crimes. So Bernard Grimm filed a motion for a mistrial. Judge Suter denied the mistrial motion, and he stated that he did it because jurors stated that they could still be impartial. Now, for people who don't understand, some people get charged with crimes. Say you get charged with a crime in Alexandria, Virginia. If the crime is too big to find a jury pool in Alexandria, Virginia that would be impartial or fair, your lawyer can file for a change of venue. This jury said that they knew what he was accused of, read intensive background on it in the Washington Post, but the judge still let them hear the rest of the trial and go to deliberation and find this brother guilty. In regard to his defense, Bernard Grimm, his defense attorney, pointed out several occasions that everyone who's testifying against Sean Branch was either a drug dealer caught doing wrong that's now turned state's evidence, or a drug user whose memory is not correct. In fact, he mentioned in open court that most of the people that ever testified against Sean Branch were people that had criminal cases that were unresolved and then they mysteriously got resolved after their testimony. In his defense again, he testified that you would think that this person was 6'5", 300 pounds, but in all actuality, the young man was 5'4", 135 pounds. And if you looked at him, you wouldn't believe that he was this person that everybody testified to as being the most dangerous person that they had encountered, or they had a fear level about him. Hey, make sure you like and subscribe to the channel, man. That's just part one of how the Washington Post was used to convict Sean Branch. Tune in for part two, coming real soon. Free to real.
Sean Branch, you would catch me on Exchanging Jews with Kirk Bone on Kirk Bone TV.